Olha ela acende. Tá frio pra lá e ela tá de coisa agora, ó. Hoje eu dei home office, Tulip.
Mike Snowden, Ben Parry, don't be shy, and Mikhail Piatek.
Cara, dormir não dá XP. É só o que eu tenho pra dizer. O que a gente vai ter agora?
So, today we're going to be talking about space, but before we do, I'm going to kick things off with a quick trailer to show you what's to come.
Ó, nesse evento aí, eles vão mostrar a tecnologia usada para criar o universo. Eu tenho grande fé que esse evento vai ser fodástico. Sério. Esse evento vai ser fodástico.
So, I'm Ali Brown, Director of Graphics Engineering. I'm responsible for all of
Vamos aumentar,
the
calma,
graphics
calma,
programs in the company and all the visual technology. We've got Ben Parry, Senior Graphics Programmer, who does all the cool stuff that I wish I had time to do. Mike Snowden, our Director of VFX. Sorry.
É maratona, Joe. Isso aqui são 24 horas de evento.
Mikhail, the Senior VFX Artist. So today we're going to talk about how we go about developing the technology and workflows to create the space environments. And we've been working on this for quite a while, and we wanted to improve our space. So, as you all know, it's a space game. Space, in reality, it can be pretty boring. That's an actual NASA photo of Earth with not a lot between us and the moon. So, that's real and all, but that's not what we want in our game. So,
vai dizer que vai trancar agora o evento.
NASA, but awesome, it looks great. Expect in a sci-fi film or game, but this isn't real, really. This has been brightened significantly from the NASA photo, and they've also used false colors where red, green, and blue are used to represent different elements. It doesn't look like this with the naked eye. It's also 24 light years across, and a billion times less.
O cara tá comentando que a realidade ela é muito chata. Então, por exemplo, assim, eles não vão fazer um universo muito próximo da realidade justamente para não ficar muito chato as viagens de um lugar para o outro. Então, provavelmente eles vão fazer algumas alterações aí.
So here's some very early prototypes of a type of gas clouds, vaguely similar to that nebula.
Olha só, cara, as nebulosas.
Our talented art team tried a bunch of different type of looks and styles of what type of shapes we could have in space. Vocês
estão ligados que dentro das nebulosas as naves não funcionam direito, sabe? Vai ter um monte de interferência, muita coisa. Acho que eles mostraram isso num dos ATVs passados, ou dos RTVs.
Rendering technology called Fume Effects and Houdini. And these are using our gas cloud rendering system.
Esses são os primeiros testes que eles fizeram.
And Ben will talk about a bit later on. And they look great. They're really interesting. But again, they have this type of fundamental problem of scale, where if you look at this, you might imagine that might be 100 miles, 1,000 miles, something like that wide. And if it's that type of scale, the scale of a moon or a planet, if you're flying through it, then there's really not going to be anything there. It's going to be like just in the middle of a cloud when you're in a plane. There's just nothing really interesting to explore at the type of conventional spaceship speed. So to demonstrate that, here's a QTing into a gas cloud. This gas cloud is about 300 kilometers wide. And while you QT, it looks great.
Essa nuvem tem 300 km de largura.
Than these nearby asteroids. So again, it's a good backdrop. It's interesting, but it's not giving us that gameplay we quite wanted. So
ele está falando a relação da escala. É uma questão muito tênue tu dizer o que tu tem que fazer. O que tu tem que fazer e o que é divertido pro game, sabe? Tu fazer uma nuvem de gás ter 300 km de largura não vai te trazer gameplay que eles estão pensando pra gente, entendeu? O exemplo clássico que eles sempre dão é o cinturão de asteroides. Na realidade, o cinturão de asteroides ele não é denso o suficiente para tu ter que desviar deles, entendeu? Então, pro game, eles condensaram o cinturão de asteroides para se tornar divertido, tu ter que desviar, ter que procurar manobrar a nave. Então, eles vão alterar o game para deixar o game mais divertido, mesmo que fuja um pouco da realidade. Olha só que legal.
Concept image for the type of thing that we might do for Planet Ring, just to add a little bit more interest.
Caraca, meu.
So,
que bonito.
It looks pretty cool, and you can imagine flying through this and these little drake down there. So yeah, this is something we're really interested to develop, but we're going to be looking at this next year. This year, what we wanted to look at is something a bit more volumetric. So one of the problems with this is, although it looks great and it'll be fun to traverse, it's because of its effectively 2D. You could just fly anywhere straight away. There's nothing that's hidden. There's no type of journey within this. Once you're in the asteroid, once you're outside of it, you can just fly to any point and then just dive in. So it gives us something, but the designers were asking for something more, something where you could have like a journey, like a 20-minute adventure into some type of structure. So we started looking at more of a volumetric approach. And what we wanted to do was build networks of tunnels and chambers that are contained within a gas cloud. So like we had earlier, we saw them type of pretty nebula-looking things. We wanted to have something that looked like that from the outside, but inside we got something more like this, some of those like clouds, and we can dodge between things at like conventional speeds.
A ideia deles é criar uma jornada para tu ter que chegar a certos lugares dentro do universo. Porque não adianta tu criar um lugar mega grande e não ter nada para fazer. Então esse é o objetivo da criação do universo por parte deles. E aí, Renan, beleza, cara? Como é que tá?
So, yeah, building volumetric data turns out to be really hard. But luckily, the film industry has solved this for us pretty much. There's lots of really great software out there that they use in the films. I mentioned before Houdini and Fume Effects. This is Houdini, I think. And they have really powerful tools so you can combine fluid simulations and multiple layers of noise to get these really interesting shapes. And it's exactly what they would do in films. So we take that data and we export it into a format called OpenVDB, which is something that was developed by the film industry, by DreamWorks Animations, for films such as Puss in Boots and a bunch of other ones. And now, once we export it into that, that's type of what we take into the engine directly, and then start convert it into our own format, and then we attempt to render that directly, which is something games don't typically type of take on that type of volumetric data. So that was the challenge for us. So, yeah, so we, as I mentioned, we generated offline tools, use fluid simulation, layers of noise. But one of the main problems with that is the amount of memory it takes for this volumetric data is pretty huge. So we have to put a lot of effort into optimizing that and crushing the data as small as we can get it. But it's still quite high. So to try and combat that,
o grande desafio entre gerar dados volumétricos é que ele consome muita memória.
Which is similar to what the environment team do when they're building a space station or any other outpost or something like that. And we're going to type of position a few of these together to build longer, more elaborate.
E eles têm gerado isso de forma offline, que nem foi a questão lá dos personagens, a animação dos personagens.
Yeah. And then, to avoid you ever recognizing these things were actually sometimes reused, we're putting a lot of effort into how we like these things.
Seja bem-vindo a essa comunidade de loucos, rapaz.
It's surprising how much difference you can really get by just relighting the same area of volumetric data differently. It's almost unrecognizable, and because there is no horizon, it's very easy to get disorientated, so it's not easy to recognize it. So we feel like we've hit a good balance between the memory cost, how quickly it's to author, because obviously the more we can reuse
tô louco pra navegar numa nebulosa e descobrir alguma coisa lá no meio, algum asteroide, alguma instalação secreta, imagina? Valeu pelo follow, Vini, seja bem-vindo, cara. Eu não sei se vocês já olharam Battlestar Galactica, mas se eu não me engano, ele teve um episódio que eles se esconderam numa nebulosa.
Hi there. So I'm just going to quickly run through sort of what makes a
cara, eu quero imagens, cara. Mostra a gameplay dos caras andando de nave no meio da fumacinha.
Overcome, I guess, hopefully. Right, so this volume is a single object. It's about 30 kilometers long, so that's quite a lot bigger than your average object in the game. Also, unlike most of the other objects in the game, you're inside it most of the time. So, to explain, oh, hang on. These are the voxels. So they're basically volumetric pixels. And as you can see, there's millions of them. So yeah, after 5,000 hours in MS Paint, this is a diagram of what it looks like roughly. So, so ignoring the cloud for a minute, we've got 3 asteroids on screen here. And what the engine can usually do for us is we can pass objects to the 3D engine, and it's got some very efficient methods that it can sort of speed things up by reducing what we have to deal with on the
Vai bater uma brisa essa fumaça, né?
The asteroid on the left, for instance, that's outside the player's view frustum, so that we never hear about that for that frame. Also, the one on the right, that's occluded by the bigger one, so again, that just never has to be dealt with. And then the big one, we know how far away from the player it is, so at least we can pick a level of detail for it, and we can do stuff like that, I guess. Now, the gas cloud has a bit of a problem, because it's occluded, it's disoccluded, it's 0 distance from the player, it's 30 kilometers from the player. If the rendering code gets hold of this, it's going to have to make loads and loads of work to try and process all of it, process half of it.
Ele está falando, ó, que as nuvens dentro da engine trazem uma grande questão de grandes desafios para eles. Porque imagina, dentro da nuvem, tu não sabe o que tu tem que mostrar para o player. Se ele está a 10 km daquele dali, ele manda exibir, não manda exibir. O que a engine vai fazer? É um monte de cálculos que a engine tem que fazer para processar esse tipo de coisa.
You can see the chunks in the middle in the empty space. We just didn't generate any because there wasn't any gas there, so there's no point processing them. The chunks that are far away from the player, we've actually got a hierarchy of chunks. So the small ones are contained within larger ones, and if they're far away, we just use the large one instead of the small one. So that sort of limits how many of them we have to process. And then when the 3D engine gets to it to cull it, you can see like quite a lot of them aren't needed anymore. So that lets the CPU do a lot of work in advance, and then the GPU can just focus on receiving a list of chunks that have already been vetted and then just drawing them.
Dentro da nuvem de gás, ele não precisa processar muita coisa mesmo. Ele não enxerga aquilo ali.
Semi-transparent. So it's unlike a normal object that's like some polygons. You draw the polygon in place, the job's done. You kind of need to accumulate all of the stuff that you can see through. So we're going to use ray marching for that. What that means is for every pixel that we draw, we just draw a line from the start through the chunk to wherever it exits, or in the second chunk.
Dá campo minado dentro da nuvem, seria massa.
We just chop that up into a bunch
a única coisa que eu fico imaginando é tu criar uma base escondida dentro de uma nuvem de gases daí.
We mask it out by however much opacity has already been accumulated on the previous steps, and we just sort of build up a final image. So
acho que depois que ela terminar até dá celebrando. Acho que antes não tem como. Mas aí a galera pode avisar mais.
So moving on, let's talk about lights. What have I got? Oh yeah. So just focusing on this one point that we're dealing with for a moment. We need to know a few things to be able to work out how much light there is for that section. So the first thing we need to know is how much gas is there at that point. That's easy enough to get. The next thing we need to know is how much light gets to that gas. So that's easy enough to do.
Para eles fazerem todo esse cálculo, eles precisam saber a densidade do gás e quanta luz tem ali.
If that light reaches the gas, how much of it actually comes towards the camera. That's a fairly simple function.
E aí, dependendo de quanta luz tem ali, ela tem que ver a densidade do gás e ver quanto a luz se dissipa dentro do gás, para saber o que o piloto está enxergando. Caraca, hein?
This is just the same test volume viewed from two different angles, and so as you can see on the one on the right, the sort of like bright halo
Lucas perguntando, será que vai dar para criar bases fora do planeta? Cara, antes não dava nem para criar bases no planeta. Imagina agora. Eu não te duvidaria nada que futuramente vai ser possível criar a base em asteroides, hein? Ou já ter uma base. Cara, tem naves que tu pode transformar em base. Tu pode transformar a Kraken numa base dentro de um gás.
What's annoying about that is that two pixels next to each other are basically getting the same result. So it's kind of pointless to be doing all that extra work. So the way we deal with that is we just break that into two separate calculations. At the start of the frame, we know how many chunks there are, and we've got distances and all that kind of useful knowledge. So we can estimate how much detail it's going to need in the lighting, and it just has to kind of calculate.
E outra, não precisa ser a gente fazer a base, né? Pode ser até a própria SIG mesmo, criar lugar para o cara explorar.
In each chunk. So we just do that work once, and then the ray march can just pass through it. It just has to get the density, get the lighting, multiply them together, move to the next step. So that just speeds the whole process up. So yeah, that gives us this. So you can see a lot more than the previous screenshot, at least. It's kind of flat, though. You can't really see the shape that you're looking at. So the problem here is that there's actually no shadows in that calculation that we've done. So we're going to move on to shadows. So how do you work out how much shadow there is between the light and that point?
Além disso, dentro da nuvem de gás, eles têm que saber quanta sombra tem que ser produzida, dependendo da luz que está chegando. Cara, é bem complexo isso. O cara tem que ser muito bom para fazer um negócio desse.
So we need something that we can calculate when the light's created that just tells us how much. You can immediately just ask it for any point how much shadow is there at this point. So obviously the thing to do is
a Viola está comparando a inteligência dos caras pela camada de cores que tem cada cabelo. É justo.
At creation, and then the GPU crashes.
Meu Deus, crashou.
Yeah, we decided not to do that. Now, to be honest, yeah, we could actually split that work over 10, 100 frames or something. It would still cost a lot of memory, and it would also give us issues that, suppose you want a lightning strike that hits a ship as it's flying somewhere, you'd have to ask the gameplay code, where is that
imagina, cara, a quantidade de cálculo que o cara tá fazendo ali.
Start creating a light for it.
É muita coisa, eu não duvido que isso aí não crachasse as máquinas quando eles estavam desenvolvendo as primeiras versões.
And what's nice about doing clouds is that if you look at, this is just a graph of how much density there is along that blue line. It's quite a low frequency kind of undulating shape. And so thinking about frequencies is actually a really good answer. So we switched to a technique that's called Fourier shadows. So this is going to be incomprehensible, this diagram probably. But basically, instead of storing a value for every single step along the ray, it stores how much would you multiply.
É verdade, foi só 2 crash até agora, acho que tá mais que bom.
If you wanted to just sort of try and get that value. And then if you do that for every single step along the ray, you end up with a curve.
Aquele ano ali, Code, é o lançamento de Stanton, tá? Depois tem os outros planetas.
Closer to the original shape. So with one weight, what you basically get is just the average value. So that's not so great. If you add one sine and cosine, you end up with something that's still not great. But as you build them up, you slowly get something that is sort of like the right shape curve. Now, we actually did stop at 7 weights because just in terms of the amount of memory and the amount of processing that we're trying to trade off, we found that was actually enough to get us from this view to this view, which we think is, it's decent.
Legal, hein? Ficou o resultado. Eles não vão avançar muito mais que isso, porque senão eles vão consumir muito dos recursos da máquina. Alguém lembra de ter jogado o Far Cry 1? Lembra quando entrava nos navios ou nos submarinos que o FPS caía lá embaixo? Justamente porque era muita coisa para renderizar. Vai ser isso daí, cara, quando a gente entrar nas nuvens. Vai ser tanto cálculo sendo feito em tempo real que, meu, a máquina simplesmente ela vai se demitir.
So we needed something that doesn't introduce a whole load more processing, a whole load more data, but we wanted to sort of enrich it and give you more of a sort of 3D sense of the scene. So a really inexpensive thing to do is you just take this, you multiply all of those values by just completely artist-controlled sliders. So you can then just apply these color. You get kind of a color fringe on the edge of a dark area where, like in this case, the red won't have actually been as shadowed as the green.
O PC vai se suicidar, né?
So yeah, that is what takes you from this to this.
Legal.
Yeah, so this is still not as good as that trailer that we showed you. But the thing is, this is actually as much as I can helpfully do. So I'm just going to hand the baton over to the VFX team with Mike and Michael.
Vocês estão enxergando uma imagem naquela fumaça ali?
And they can carry us the rest of the way.
Eu vi uma caveira ali, hein? Uma caveira alien. Acho que cada um vê um negócio diferente na fumaça, né?
Okay. So this is how the gas cloud looked. Fantastic stuff that Ben just showed there. And we were obviously really happy with the lighting, the visual fidelity, and the technical achievement of this thing. But inevitably, after showing it to art and design, and Ali alluded to this earlier, there are several issues that we're still going to need to solve. So the gas clouds are actually, because they're so big, you know, you're tiny compared to this thing, they actually can be quite frustrating rather than fun to traverse, because they feel so empty. And it's also really easy to lose your bearings. You don't really get any kind of visual read of the speed that you're going at. And because it's so empty, it doesn't really feel dangerous, and that's a really important thing that design and art really want to be able to kind of achieve.
Os caras falando que as nuvens de gás elas são muito vazias e não trazem nenhum desafio para o jogador.
With VFX. So in this slide, I'm showing basically an empty scene. It's just a block out. There's nothing really in there. And I'm just layering it up with different types of effects.
Tá mostrando alguns efeitos, ó.
On top of particles.
Nossa, até a transmissão ficou lenta. Os FPS da transmissão caiu.
Caramba. Throw in some screen effects as well. So these are all the kinds of things. Like I say, this is kind of a typical thing that we do, and if we can make that look great, it's a simple block out, then we surely should be able to do that with a gas cloud as well. So that's our goal. But how do we do that? And to explain a little bit about how we do that for something that's not quite as conventional, Mihal's going to come and show us some stuff.
A apresentação do cara foi muito rápida, hein? Assim é fácil trabalhar, o cara chegou ali, deu meia dúzia de palavras, já passou o bastão.
Okay, so we've seen that level, and now comes time to actually add some VFX to the gas cloud. But conceptually, gas cloud is kind of like a level, but doesn't have any walls.
O salário dele é menor.
There is also no concept of up and down, so it's kind of mind-boggling how you kind of organize the space. It doesn't have any geometries to start with, so we cannot really attach VFX to anything specific, and also there is nothing acting as a visual guide.
A nuvem é muito complexo, cara. Não tem geometria para te poder adicionar elementos para ele.
So let's take a look at the design feedback that we've been given. It's too easy to lose your sense of direction, speed, and distance. Ideally, what we could do is introduce like a flow of air that moves through the gas cloud. And we would have some particles moving through that flow of air. So if you stop, you look around, you can observe the direction of motion and find your way through the tunnel. And that could also add the motion that was missing in the example we've seen before. Next step is making the gas cloud look more dangerous. And it's kind of easy, but not really, because the example we've seen didn't have any distraction elements to it, so we can add them. Like
para eles colocarem em senso de direção e espaço, eles vão criar partículas para te poder passar por elas e ver visualmente mais ou menos a velocidade que está andando. A equipe de arte também está tentando criar uma sensação de mais periculosidade dentro da nuvem.
Let's take a look at the first problem first. The new GPU particle system,
agora eles vão mostrar como é que eles vão fazer o sistema de partículas lá dentro da nuvem.
It allows us to use so-called vector fields. Essentially, vector fields are snapshots of wind. So a vector field is a texture, a 3D texture, and each pixel of that texture is a vector in a specific direction. Then, if a particle flows through the vector field, we can sample that vector and push the particle towards that direction. So essentially, a vector field is like a snapshot of the wind.
Essa engine, né?
So here in Houdini, we can bring the actual gas cloud data. We can turn all the gas cloud into a mesh, use the Houdini's built-in particle system, flow all of them through the tunnel.
Meu Deus.
Then we can save all that data and use in the engine to actually achieve that sense of motion. But vector fields are only about motion and direction, and there's still the danger problem that we have. So for that, we figured we need lightning and so-called electromagnetic interference.
Tá, a ideia deles é colocar itens que deixem a nuvem de gás mais perigosa, que pareça mais perigosa. Mas ela vai ser mais perigosa ou só vai parecer mais perigosa? Isso que eu queria saber.
Ok.
Qual é o problema de tu viajar? Olha ali, ó, olha ali no radar que massa.
Minimum strength and maximum strength. Basically,
o negócio não está funcionando direito por causa da nebulosa.
It allows us to do that kind of distortion on any type of screen in the game.
Que massa, cara.
So the idea here was to have more interference the closer you are to more dense areas of the gas cloud.
Ah, que legal, hein?
Now it plays. Okay, so
same
effect applied to
Rising.
mobile glass without much effort, really. Again, the way that the effect was made.
Que massa.
The problem is, with this effect, that the first version of it was driven by the density of gas cloud. So you get more dense areas and less dense areas. And basically, we wanted to make denser areas more dangerous. So what we did is that we are sampling density of the gas cloud at player's location. The problem with that was showing you that you are in the danger area, and that's not quite useful. Design wanted to inform you that you're about to enter the dense area. And also sampling the gas cloud density is not very efficient. So we had to come up with another solution. And for that we use so-called sign distance fields. So
o problema é que eles querem fazer que, por exemplo, assim, o cara ele vai pilotando para áreas mais densas da nuvem e vai falhando mais ainda nos equipamentos por causa da densidade dela. Só que eles não têm como mostrar para o cara que ele está numa área perigosa. Agora eles vão explicar como é que eles vão fazer isso daí.
Send that value to the shader and do the interference. But it's kind of slow. So sign distance fields, they are 3D textures which are storing distances to a nearest surface. So, in a nutshell, it allows us to figure out if you are close enough to, or close to the dense area, the danger area, and we know it for cheap. And if we have this value, we can also drive lightning. But how we do distance in something that's a volume? So in Houdini, we can take the gas cloud data again.
Houdini, será que é a mecânica que eles usam para fazer
dense areas
sistema de gás?
Density is 0.9 and higher. We turn these areas into a mesh. Then we made a tool that is turning a mesh into the sign
Imagina
distance
tu ficar
field.
sem combustível dentro de uma nuvem de gás. Não tem nem como tu pedir socorro porque os equipamentos ficam falhando.
The mesh that we've made. Then all that is stored in the retexture, and we can reuse it in the engine and drive the
Seria legal largar drones dentro da nuvem para poder fazer o escaneamento, né?
But we had all these kind of dynamic types of effects. There was also a need for art and design to be able to control and trigger set-piece events. So we still needed controlled, story-driven events. For example, you're flying through the gas cloud. Suddenly there's lightning striking down a rock. So for that, we again used Houdini. Here we can see how a rock destruction is being made. So first we take the rock asset, we are defining areas in which rock will be split into pieces. Then we can use physics forces to animate that destruction. If we are happy with the result, then it's just a matter of UV mapping, and Houdini is really good at it, because we can quickly and easily UV unwrap like 50 pieces or so that we have in here. Then we can just export all of that back to the engine, and it just works. So heading back to Mike.
Ah, eu achei que ia ser mais coisas sobre o universo, não só sobre as nuvens.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about lightning, which is one of my favorite subjects. So yeah, lightning, it's a key visual requirement of gas clouds, both for art and design. I've gone backwards.
Mas eu não duvido que não vai ter vários asteroides lá dentro.
We were able to create really nice lightning effects, but we didn't really have a lot of control over them. We could basically place them. That was pretty much it. They were also really expensive to use. So from the point of view of needing control, we developed several new options to allow us to do so, including the ability to have lightning automatically position itself along the cloud surface. So that's using the sign distance field, which Michał talked about just then.
Muita coisa
we also brought in a new
verdade.
setting called conductivity applied to, so all surface types can have now.
Uau, o cara tá usando tanto FPS que nem a transmissão tá mais aguentando.
Together, the one was safe.
Meu Deus, meu amigo, para de fazer essas luzes aí, tu não vai conseguir transmitir.
There's going to be lots of applications for that, and we're going to be able to do with it.
Vai travar.
So the cost, as I say, previously, even though we could do really nice looking lightning, it was really, really expensive, and that's really a problem for something such as the gas cloud, where we want everything else to be as cheap as possible. So with the previous system, if we were going to draw something like this, we're going to be using a lot of control points. Now, the thing about control points is they're very expensive. So you'd probably, wherever this thing is going, it's basically been driven by the control points. So to kind of create that very detailed shape, you're looking at a lot of control points. But right down.
O cara tá comentando que fazer esse tipo de efeito, ele é muito custoso pra engine do game.
To solve that was rendering of the bolt, and we actually used GPU. What that allowed to do was use a much smaller amount of control points. So this is a fairly crude screenshot, apologies for that, but you can see the red dots are basically the control points, and we're going to use the GPU particles to actually draw that kind of detail in between them. Yeah, we're basically joining the dots. So to do that, as I say, using GPU particles, we actually created a new type of particle emitter, which is a spline-guided one. So this is an example of spline-guided particle emitter. You can see on the bottom I've got some text showing what we're actually doing. This is just going to loop, so bear with me. But yeah, rather than just have a single beam from 2 points, we wanted it to be a bit more interesting visually. So we got some various noise options. We're using simplex noise in this example, but we also had value noise as well. The way I think of it is it basically makes a straight line wibbly wobbly. I'm not the most technical out of this panel, so yeah, and we've also got shuffle noise on pulse, which allows the noise to kind of reset itself based on the random timer that we can add via the particle system. And then we've got a second octave, which just allows an extra level of detail, which is obviously really important for something like lightning in the gas cloud, where we need it to look really, really nice from far away, and we also need it to look super detailed.
Same with this plating here. It really bumps up the terrain detail by a lot. And
essa aqui tá muito mais interessante.
Sit much better in the scene. All right.
Na verdade era essa aqui que eu queria ter visto, cara. Achei que eles iam trabalhar nessa
So
aqui.
this is the very last object set that we added, right? You see that the detail has become quite detailed now. If I zoom out, you never get the feeling of.
Poxa, eu fiquei olhando aquela dali achando que a gente ia chegar nesse ponto aqui.
So this is working quite fine. But I was kind of jumping in between places, so let's have a look at the entire process from this view again. We added our height map. We added our texture. We added our distance textures.
Ó, que massa, ó.
We added our ground materials. We did additional breakup. We added all our big objects. And all our detail objects.
Ah, muito melhor, né?
Let's get back to the textures. And now, again, back to everything else, like the final result. So this would be the before and after, right? This is how we
geralmente a arte, ela é uma coisa muito mais subjetiva, né? Eu acho muito complicado trabalhar com arte, porque para te acertar ela, isso depende muito do que os outros vão achar. Olha que massa, cara.
All right. Let's have a run through our environment. What do you guys want to see?
Ah, que massa, gravidade.
I seem to have forgotten to set the gravity on the planet. Let's see how that behaves.
Que massa.
Jump over it? No. Okay, cool. I think this works quite fine. What do you guys think? Awesome.
Cara, que legal que ficou o planeta, mano.
Alright.
A manca de metal. Eu notei isso também.
Really cool. I'm not sure if we are going to put this in the game or not. But I hope you guys liked it. I hope it gave you a little bit more of an understanding for how we create ecosystems and ultimately planets, right? Yeah, thanks a lot. Thank you guys.
Mas já acabou isso aí?
Yeah.
Is there any work between your team and the design teams?
Tem que voltar para outra então.
I was thinking like mineral deposits on planets. Do the colors? Are you ever told, okay, this is an
Aí a gente sai, ó, e os caras fazem coisa interessante, ó. Não é pra dar com um gato morto no maluco desse. Ah, retiro o que eu disse, ó. A gente não teve paciência pra esperar, ó. Ah, ficou furioso o bagulho, meu. Que massa que tu quase não consegue enxergar as coisas até chegar perto delas, velho. Caracas, velho. Ah, que massa! Uou! E a gente achou que a outra apresentação era melhor que essa, né? Pena que tá mais travado que o próprio game.
Yeah, I hope you liked it. It's a lot of work that's went into that. A lot of different people have had their hands on that, and it's nice to finally show.
Sim, vai ser bem perigoso mesmo.
Like I said, that was in game. We recorded it last week for you. There's a bit more to do on it, so I'll go through.
Eles estão comentando que dele foi gravado em game, hein? Semana passada.
So, everything we talked about today, like I said, it's in engine, but we just need to polish a few things, so it's not quite ready for showtime.
Poxa, Vieira, perdeu o lançamento da Estes 4.0,
cara. That was running live, recorded live, but we need to do a bit more work to get the performance down for the lower spec machines to make sure everyone can enjoy this. We need a few more shadow things to be done, so the opaque objects, the asteroids there, weren't receiving shadows from the gas cloud. It makes them look a bit stuck on, so that's something we're in the process of doing. It should be done soon. A lot of the VFX was placed manually in that scene, but now that we've got this SDF tech in, we're hoping to build a procedural tool to help place all this VFX. It took us a while to learn how to make something like this look good, and now that we know, now we can write a tool to help us make it very quickly, so the designers don't have to spend quite so long coming back to the art team.
O problema é que a apresentação deles foi muito amarrada, né? Muito técnica, na verdade.
It's all very new, you know, nobody's made stuff like this before in our company, so
não foi amarrada, ela foi muito técnica e demorou bastante para chegar nesse ponto.
To do this quicker, so we can churn them out a bit faster. And then the procedurally generated volumes is something we also want to explore. So I mentioned planetary rings at the start of the presentation. That's something we definitely want to do.
Legal que essa tecnologia ela vai criar aqueles anéis planetários também.
That uniquely over the size of a planet. And then we're thinking there might be other uses, like gas giants might be one. The surface of a gas giant could be made using exactly the same tech. And there's obviously plenty of other uses. We could have like the trail of a comet and other things like this. So yeah, so hope you liked it, and that's the presentation over.
Sim, cara, gigantes gasosos, Crusader, reabastecimento.